The massive viewing screen in the Grand Council chamber showed what many of the aliens considered a joke. Admiral Stone of the United Earth Fleet stood proudly on his command bridge, his small ship barely reaching 1/10 the length of the smallest council vessel. Behind him, through the viewport, floated the rest of the human fleet, 30 ships that looked like toys compared to the giant vessels of the Galactic Council. High Counselor Grex, a towering blue-skinned alien, leaned back in his gravity chair and tried to hide his amusement. The other council members didn't even try. Their rumbling laughter echoed through the chamber. "You wish to join the Galactic Council." Grex's translator conveyed his words with a hint of mockery. "With these vessels." Admiral Stone remained professional, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Yes, High Counselor. Earth and her colonies are ready to join the galactic community. Our fleet stands ready to contribute to collective defense and peacekeeping operations." Another burst of laughter filled the chamber. Counselor Van, whose species built ships larger than small moons, waved one of his 4 arms dismissively. "Perhaps they could serve as escape pods for our actual warships," he said, triggering more laughter. Through all this, only General Dax of the Council's military division remained quiet. His species had evolved from predators, and something about the calm confidence of the human admiral made his old instincts tingle with warning. "Their largest vessel is smaller than our civilian transport ships," one council member noted with a sneer. "And how many crew do you maintain on these fascinating vessels?" asked Grex, not bothering to hide his condescension. "The flagship carries a crew of 50. Admiral Stone replied calmly. "Our smaller vessels operate with crews of 20 to 30. This time, the laughter was so loud that the chamber's acoustic dampeners had to activate. Most council ships carried crews in the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. "Enough." General Dax suddenly spoke up, his voice cutting through the amusement. "Admiral Stone, while we appreciate Earth's interest in joining the Council, you must understand our concerns. The galaxy is not always a peaceful place. Pirates, raiders, and sometimes even hostile civilizations must be dealt with. How could your compact fleet contribute to such efforts?" Admiral Stone's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "With respect, General, size isn't everything. Humanity has learned through its own history that bigger doesn't always mean better. We prefer efficiency, speed, and precision over brute force." "Charming philosophy," Grex said, "but hardly practical in real combat situations. Our smallest defensive ships are at least 5 times the size of your largest vessel. Perhaps a demonstration would be in order," Admiral Stone suggested quietly. "A demonstration?" Van laughed again. "Of what?" "How quickly your ships can hide behind our larger ones." Before anyone could respond, alarms suddenly blared throughout the council station. A junior officer rushed into the chamber, their scales pale with concern. "High Counselor, we've lost sensor contact with the human fleet." The laughter died instantly. The massive viewing screen showed empty space where the human ships had been moments before. "Impossible." Grex stood up. "Our sensors can track ships through jump space." "They couldn't have." "Sir," the officer interrupted, "we're detecting multiple small energy signatures inside our defensive perimeter." The screen shifted to show new angles. The human fleet had somehow slipped through the Council's most advanced detection grid. Now they were positioned in perfect attack formation around the Council's prized dreadnoughts. Admiral Stone's voice came through the comm system, still calm and professional. "As I was saying, High Counselor, sometimes the best things come in small packages. Shall we discuss our application to join the Council more seriously now?" General Dax let out a sound that his species used to show respect. "Indeed, Admiral. I believe we should talk about your fleet's capabilities in much greater detail." He turned to the other council members, who sat in stunned silence. "Unless anyone else wants to make jokes about escape pods." No one laughed this time. The age of dismissing human ships as tiny had just come to an abrupt end. 2 months after the humans' impressive demonstration, the Council's Central Intelligence Office was flooded with strange reports. Agent Kell, head of Special Observations, stared at his display with growing concern as another report came in. "Third pirate fleet this month. Just gone," he muttered, scratching his scaled head. The report showed the same pattern. A well-known pirate group had attempted to raid what they thought was an easy target, a small human cargo ship. Hours later, their entire fleet had vanished without a trace. The door to his office slid open, and General Dax walked in. "You called for me, Agent Kell." "Yes, General." "Look at this." Kell pulled up a holographic map showing dozens of red dots. Each mark represents a disappeared hostile force. All had one thing in common: they tried to attack human ships. Dax leaned forward, his predator eyes narrowing. No debris. None. No distress calls. No radiation signatures. They're just gone. Kell switched to another display. But that's not the strangest part. Watch this sensor recording from yesterday. A hologram showed a human trading vessel under attack by pirates. As they watched, the small human ship seemed to flicker, like a faulty image. When the image cleared, the pirate ships were gone, and the human vessel continued on its way, as if nothing had happened. "Our best sensors can't explain what happened," Kell admitted. "It's like watching a magic trick." General Dax remembered the demonstration at the council chamber. "Have you noticed anything else unusual?" "Yes." Kell pulled up more data. "Every time we think we've figured out the size of their fleet, the numbers don't add up. Ships appear where they shouldn't be possible. Sometimes our sensors show a human vessel in 3 different systems at once." In another part of the station, council scientists were facing their own puzzles. Dr. Mira, the council's head of ship design, was giving a presentation to her colleagues. "It doesn't make sense," she said, pointing to the scans of human vessels. "Their power readings are impossibly low for ships their size. Either their technology breaks the laws of physics, or," she paused, "or we're not seeing what's really there." One of her colleagues, Dr. Pax, raised his hand. "Could they be using some form of dimensional technology?" "That's what I thought at first," Mira replied. "But look at this." She showed a new scan. "Their ships seem to bend space around them in ways we've never seen. It's as if they're not just moving through space. They're moving with it." Back in the intelligence office, a junior agent burst in, interrupting Kell and Dax's discussion. "Sir, we just got word from Border Station 7. They detected what looked like a small human scout ship. When they tried to scan it, he handed over a datapad." Kell's eyes widened. "That's impossible." According to this, the scout ship's internal space was larger than its external dimensions. "Like I said 2 months ago," Dax growled softly, "we need to take them more seriously. Have you studied their history like I suggested?" Kell nodded slowly. "Yes. Their wars. They're different from ours. While we focused on building bigger ships with more powerful weapons, they learned to fight smarter. They developed stealth technology, not because they wanted to hide, but because they never saw the point in fighting fair." And Dax pressed. "And every time they faced a stronger enemy, they didn't try to match their strength. They found ways to turn their own smallness into an advantage." Kell looked troubled. "General, I think we're lucky they're friendly." A new alert flashed on Kell's screen. Another pirate fleet had vanished, this time near the outer rim. The footage showed a brief glimpse of what appeared to be a human ship, but the image seemed to fold in on itself before disappearing. "Send a message to the council," Dax ordered. "Tell them we need to revise our military protocols." And, he added with a grim smile, "suggest they stop making jokes about the size of human ships." As if to emphasize his point, the station's sensors suddenly reported 3 human vessels passing nearby. A moment later, the count changed to 5, then 2, then 4. No one in the room could tell which number, if any, was real. The tiny fleet, it seemed, was proving to be anything but small in its impact on the galaxy. The emergency alarms in the council chamber hadn't stopped ringing for 3 days straight. High Counselor Grex stared at the tactical display with hollow eyes as another red dot appeared. Another council world under attack. Fourth Fleet is gone, a military officer announced, his voice shaking. The Dominators. They just tore through them like paper. The Dominators had appeared from the dark space beyond the galaxy's edge. Their ships were massive, even larger than council vessels, and shaped like giant black pyramids. They didn't communicate. They didn't make demands. They just destroyed everything in their path. General Dax slammed his fist on the command table. 7th time. That's the 7th battle group we've lost this week. The display showed the wreckage of council ships floating in space, each one split clean in half by the Dominator's energy weapons. Our ships are too slow, one of the military advisors said. The Dominators target our engines first. Once we can't move, he didn't need to finish. Everyone had seen the footage. A new alert flashed on the main screen. 3 Dominator ships had appeared near a civilian colony. The closest Council defense fleet was 2 hours away. Not again, Grex whispered. They had already lost 4 colonies this way. But this time was different. As they watched, a single small dot appeared on the tactical display. A human cargo ship, according to the sensors. Get that ship out of there, Grex ordered. They'll be destroyed. Before anyone could send a warning, 2 of the Dominator ships suddenly spun out of formation. Their black surfaces were covered in small explosions, as if they'd run into an invisible minefield. What's happening? Grex demanded. The sensors officer shook his head in confusion. The human ship, it's doing something to space itself. The Dominator's weapons they're hitting their own ships. They watched in amazement as the massive Dominator vessels fired their weapons, only to have their energy beams curve back on themselves. The human ship seemed to dance between their shots, each movement precise and planned. Message from the human vessel, the communications officer announced. Admiral Stone's voice filled the chamber. Council Station, this is the Earth Trader Swift Wind. Be advised. We've engaged hostile forces to protect the colony, requesting permission to demonstrate our new defense protocols. General Dax let out a barking laugh. Permission granted, Admiral. Show us what those tiny ships of yours can do. The battle that followed left everyone in the council chamber speechless. The human ship moved in ways that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Sometimes it appeared to be in multiple places at once. When the Dominators fired their planet-killing weapons, the human vessel somehow bent the energy beams away from the colony. Message from Earth Command, the communications officer said. They're sending 15 ships to assist. Some council members laughed nervously. 15. Against the Dominator fleet. But General Dax wasn't laughing. He remembered the demonstration 2 months ago. How many ships did you say are coming? He asked carefully. Sensors show. Wait. The officer looked confused. Now they show 20 ships. No, 12. No. I can't get a clear count. The Dominator ships were in chaos. Their perfect formation broke apart as human vessels seemed to appear and disappear around them. Their weapons, unstoppable against the Council's massive ships, couldn't hit the smaller, agile targets. Tactical analysis, Dax ordered. The humans are using the Dominator's size against them, the tactical officer reported. Their ships are too big to turn quickly. The humans are. They're somehow bending space to redirect the Dominator's own energy weapons back at them. Within an hour, the battle was over. The Dominator ships were either destroyed or retreating, leaving the colony untouched. On the tactical display, the human ships formed a perfect defensive circle around the planet. Message from Admiral Stone, the communications officer said quietly. Put it through, Grex ordered, his voice humbled. Council Station. Threat has been neutralized. Request permission to establish a permanent defense perimeter. Also, there was a pause. We've analyzed their attack patterns. We know how to stop them. If you're willing to listen, we have a plan." Grex looked at General Dax, who nodded firmly. "Admiral Stone," Grex said, "I believe it's time we had a serious discussion about humanity's role in galactic defense. And," he added, "I owe you an apology about those size jokes." The Council's main war room had changed a lot in the past week. Gone were the massive holographic displays showing huge fleets in standard formations. Instead, dozens of small screens tracked the movements of human ships as they prepared their defense plan. Admiral Stone stood before the Council leaders, pointing to a new tactical map. The room was quiet. No one made jokes about size anymore. Not since the humans had saved that colony. "Our ships use what we call space folding technology," Stone explained, showing a simulation of a human vessel. "We don't just move through space, we bend it. Think of it like making a paper airplane versus folding the paper itself." General Dax leaned forward, interested. "And this is why our sensors can't get accurate counts of your ships." Stone nodded. "Exactly. When we fold space, we can appear to be in multiple places at once, or nowhere at all." He pressed a button, and the simulation showed a human ship seemingly multiplying itself. "It's not illusions or tricks. We're actually creating temporary copies of our ships using folded spacetime." "But how do you power such technology?" Dr. Mira asked. "Our calculations show it should take enormous energy." Stone smiled. "That's the beauty of it. We don't use brute force. We find the natural creases in spacetime and work with them. It's like finding a river's current instead of trying to force your way upstream." A warning alarm interrupted their discussion. 3 Dominator ships had appeared near a major trade route. "Watch," Stone said calmly, pointing to a new screen. "Battle Group Delta is about to show you our wolf pack tactics." The screen showed 5 small human ships approaching the Dominator vessels. But instead of attacking directly, they began moving in strange patterns. "First, we create a space fold web," Stone narrated as the human ships wove invisible lines between them. "The Dominators can't detect it because they're looking for energy weapons and shields, not space distortions." The Council members watched in amazement as the Dominator ships suddenly found themselves trapped in a kind of spatial net. Every time they tried to move or fire their weapons, space itself seemed to twist around them. "Now for the real trick," Stone said with a slight grin. The human ships began their attack. They didn't use traditional weapons. Instead, they manipulated their spacefold web to turn the Dominator's own movement against them. When a Dominator ship tried to fire its main weapon, the energy beam curved through folded space and hit one of its allies. "This is impossible," one Council member whispered. "They're fighting 3 capital ships with just 5 small vessels." "Size isn't everything," General Dax reminded them, echoing Stone's words from months ago. "Look at how they move, like a pack of wolves taking down larger prey." The battle was over in minutes. The Dominator ships, unable to cope with fighting in folded space, retreated in disarray. Not a single human ship was lost. "And that," Stone said, "is just one of our basic tactics. We have many more." He brought up another display, showing the locations of human ships across Council space. "We've positioned our fleet to create a defensive network. Each ship can support the others through spacefolds, allowing us to respond to threats almost instantly." A Council member raised their hand. "But Admiral, surely you can't maintain these spacefolds indefinitely. The energy cost alone." Stone's response was interrupted by another alert. This time, a massive Dominator fleet, at least 30 ships, had appeared near a Council mining colony. "Perfect timing," Stone said. "Battle groups Alpha through Echo. Execute protocol origami." The Council watched in awe as human ships began appearing near the colony. First 5, then 10, then numbers that kept shifting as space itself seemed to ripple and fold. The Dominator fleet found itself surrounded by what appeared to be hundreds of human vessels. though no one could tell how many were real and how many were spacefold duplicates. "Remember how you all laughed at our tiny fleet?" Stone asked quietly. "The thing about small ships is, they're really good at hiding how many of them there actually are." The battle that followed would be remembered as the day the Council learned that in space warfare, size truly didn't matter. What mattered was how clever you were with the space itself. The young Council officer Reed watched in fascination as the holographic display showed another successful defense against the Dominators. Coming from a species that had always built massive warships, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Again," he said to the human instructor. "Please show me that maneuver again." The instructor, Captain Blake of the Earth Fleet, smiled and replayed the battle sequence. The human ships moved like a school of fish, flowing around the larger Dominator vessels in perfect harmony. "We call this the river dance," Blake explained. "Each ship creates small space folds that their neighbors can ride on. It's like surfing on waves, but we're surfing on space itself." Reed leaned closer to the display. "And this uses less energy than our traditional engines." "Much less," Blake nodded. "Your big ships try to push through space. We let space help us move." Their lesson was interrupted by an emergency alert. A Dominator attack force had appeared near one of the Council's main shipyards. But this time, something was different. "Look," Reed pointed excitedly. "Our ships, they're copying your tactics." On the display, several Council vessels, traditionally slow and cumbersome, were attempting to move in smaller, more agile groups. They weren't as graceful as the human ships, but they were definitely more effective than their old formation tactics. General Dax entered the command center, watching the battle with approval. "Your training sessions are paying off, Captain Blake. Our crews are finally learning." The battle unfolding showed just how much things had changed. Council ships, once easy targets for the Dominators, now broke into smaller battle groups. They didn't have the humans' space-folding technology, but they were learning to use their size differently. "It's like watching children learn to dance," Blake commented as a group of Council ships successfully evaded a Dominator attack formation. "Speaking of learning," Dax said, "show them the new design." Blake nodded and pulled up a new hologram. It showed a Council ship, but unlike anything they'd built before. It was smaller, more streamlined, with systems clearly inspired by human vessels. "This is the first of our new hybrid designs," Dax explained proudly. "We're keeping some of our heavy weapons, but incorporating human principles of space manipulation and maneuverability." Reed studied the design with excitement. "How soon can we begin production?" "The first ships are already under construction," Dax replied. "But more importantly, we're retrofitting our existing fleet with new systems based on human insights." The emergency alert suddenly changed tone. The Dominators were adjusting their tactics, trying to counter the Council ships' new movements. But they'd forgotten about the human ships waiting in the folded space nearby. "Watch this," Blake said with a grin. "Time to show them our latest trick." The human ships emerged from their space folds in perfect position. But instead of attacking directly, they created a complex web of spatial distortions around the Dominator fleet. The massive enemy ships suddenly found themselves trapped in a kind of space-time maze. "We call this the spider's web," Blake explained. "Each fold creates a path our Council allies can use to strike from unexpected angles." Reed watched in amazement as Council ships darted through the human-created paths, hitting the Dominators from positions that should have been impossible to reach. "It's beautiful," he whispered, "like a dance between stars." The battle ended quickly, with the Dominators retreating in confusion. Their mighty ships, designed to fight traditional battles against massive opponents, had no answer for this new style of space warfare. Later, in the Council's main chamber, General Dax addressed the gathered representatives. "For too long, we thought bigger meant better," he said. "We built our ships like floating cities, proud and powerful. But the humans showed us that space itself is our greatest weapon. They taught us that true strength lies not in size, but in understanding how to work with the fabric of space itself. He gestured to the design of the new hybrid ship. This is the future of our fleet. Not giants that try to dominate space, but ships that work with it. The humans didn't just teach us new tactics. They taught us a new way of thinking about space itself. As if to emphasize his point, a small group of human ships passed by the Council station, their space-folding drives leaving beautiful ripples in the fabric of space-time, a reminder that sometimes the smallest things could have the biggest impact on the universe. The largest Dominator fleet ever seen had appeared at the edge of Council space. 100 massive black pyramids blocked out the starlight, their weapons charged and ready. This was their final push, an all-out attack to crush both human and Council forces. In the Council's war room, Admiral Stone stood calmly beside General Dax. The tactical display showed the massive enemy fleet approaching. "They think they've figured out our tricks," Stone said, a slight smile on his face. "They're expecting our usual space-folding tactics." Dax nodded. "That's why today will be different. Today, we show them what humans and Council forces can do together." The combined fleet waited near a small star system. To the Dominators, it looked like an easy target. Just 20 human ships and 30 of the Council's new hybrid vessels. "All ships, execute Operation Thunderstorm," Stone commanded. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. The human ships began their space-folding maneuvers, but with a new twist. Instead of creating multiple images of themselves, they began folding space around the Council's hybrid ships. "Look at that," one of the officers whispered in awe. The Council ships, guided by their human allies, slipped through the folds in space like fish through water. Their new designs, inspired by human technology, let them ride the space folds perfectly. What looked like 50 ships to the Dominators suddenly became an impossible puzzle of attacks from all directions. "Now for Phase 2, Stone announced. "Captain Walker, you have the lead." The HMS Swift Strike, now famous throughout Council space, led a group of human ships in a complex dance. They created a massive space fold, larger than any they'd attempted before. The Council's hybrid ships followed them in perfect formation. "They're trying to surround us," the Dominator commander's message echoed through space. "Maintain formation. Their tiny ships can't harm our fleet." Those would be the last words many heard from the Dominator command. The human Council fleet had created something entirely new, a massive space-fold web that turned the very fabric of space into a weapon. "All ships," Walker's voice was steady. "Execute the thunderclap." Every ship, human and Council alike, activated their drives at exactly the same moment. The space-fold web collapsed inward, trapping the Dominator fleet in a maze of twisted space-time. Their massive ships, once so powerful, found themselves fighting against space itself. By the stars, Dax breathed as he watched the display. "It's like watching a spider web made of lightning." The Dominator ships tried to fire their weapons, but in the twisted space, their energy beams curved back on themselves. They tried to move, but every direction led them into another trap. The smaller human and Council ships darted through the chaos like electrons through a circuit, striking at weak points with surgical precision. "Their command ship is isolated," Walker reported, moving in for the final strike. The Swift Strike led a combined group of human and Council ships through a series of rapid space folds, appearing simultaneously at multiple points around the Dominator flagship. The massive black pyramid tried to target them, but it was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. "All ships, final attack pattern," Walker commanded. "Show them what the tiny fleet can really do." The attack was beautiful in its complexity yet simple in its execution. Each ship played its part perfectly, Council and human vessels moving as one. They created a cascade of space folds that literally tied the fabric of space into knots around the Dominator command ship. When it was over, half the Dominator fleet was destroyed. The other half retreated in panic, their mighty ships running from vessels a fraction of their size. In the war room, cheers erupted. Council members who had once laughed at the small human ships now celebrated alongside their human allies. General Dax turned to Admiral Stone with newfound respect. "You didn't just teach us new ways to fight," he said. "You taught us new ways to think." Stone smiled. "Sometimes the smallest changes make the biggest differences." Speaking of which, he looked at the tactical display showing the retreating Dominators. "I don't think they'll be mocking our tiny fleet anymore." The victory marked more than just a turning point in the war. It marked the beginning of a new era in space warfare, where the size of your ship mattered far less than how cleverly you could use the space around it. 6 months after the great victory over the Dominators, the Council chambers looked very different. Where once stood displays of massive warships, now hung images of the combined human Council fleet. In the center, a hologram showed the famous HMS Swift Strike beside the Council's newest vessel, a sleek hybrid design that was changing the face of space travel. High Counselor Grex stood at the podium, addressing the gathered representatives of 100 spacefaring races. His voice, once filled with mockery toward human ships, now carried nothing but respect. "1 year ago, we laughed at the human fleet," he began. "We called their ships tiny. We thought size meant power." He paused, looking at Admiral Stone in the front row. "We were wrong." The main display activated, showing scenes from their victories over the Dominators. Human ships danced through folded space while Council vessels followed their lead, moving with a grace that would have seemed impossible just months ago. "The humans didn't just help us win a war," Grex continued. "They showed us a better way to travel through space itself." Dr. Mira stepped forward, presenting the latest designs from the Council's shipyards. "We've completely changed how we build our ships," she explained. "Instead of trying to dominate space with size, we now work with it." The hologram showed the new Council fleet. The ships were smaller, more elegant. Each one carried technology that blended human space-folding principles with Council engineering. "Our fuel efficiency has improved by 300%, Mira reported proudly. "Our ships can now travel faster, move more freely, and defend our space better than ever before." General Dax, now the head of the Combined Fleet Command, stood up. "But perhaps the most important change isn't in our ships at all. It's in how we think." He waved his hand, and the display showed training sessions where human instructors taught Council crews their techniques. Young officers from 100 worlds learned to see space not as something to conquer, but as something to work with. "The humans taught us that true strength isn't about being the biggest or the most powerful," Dax said. "It's about being the smartest, the most adaptable, and knowing how to use what you have." Admiral Stone walked to the podium when invited. The chamber fell silent. Everyone wanted to hear from the man whose tiny fleet had changed everything. "A year ago, I stood here while you laughed at our ships," he said with a gentle smile. "Today, I stand here as an ally and friend. But more importantly, I stand here with hope for our future." The display changed to show the border of Council space, where the new combined fleet patrolled. Human ships and Council vessels moved together in perfect harmony, their space-folding drives creating beautiful patterns in the fabric of reality. "The Dominators taught us all a valuable lesson," Stone continued. "No single race, no matter how powerful, can face the challenges of space alone. But together, combining our different ways of thinking, there's nothing we can't achieve." The chamber erupted in applause. Even some of the oldest Council members, who had once been the loudest critics of the tiny human ships, joined in the celebration. As the ceremony ended, a young Council cadet approached Admiral Stone with a question that made the old spacer smile. "Admiral," the cadet asked, "is it true that humans made their ships small on purpose? That you knew all along that working with space was better than trying to overpower it?" Stone's eyes twinkled. "Let me tell you a secret," he said. "Sometimes the universe's greatest lessons come in small packages. We didn't make our ships small because we had to. We made them small because we learned to listen to what space itself was trying to teach us." As if to emphasize his point, a group of human ships passed by the Council station's windows, their space-folding drives leaving ripples in reality that looked like stars dancing in the night. The age of the giant warships was over. A new era had begun, one where the smallest ships could change the largest galaxy, simply by understanding that true power comes not from size, but from wisdom. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the remaining dominators looked at their massive ships and finally understood why size wasn't everything after all.